Hello and welcome to the Ghetto Fighters House Talking Memory Program, the legacy of women's resistance in Auschwitz, marking the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. My name is Medine Shachar, and I'm an educator and a guide at the Ghetto Fighters House, and will be your host for today's program. I want to welcome our global audience with a special welcome, as always, to the survivors and their families that are with us today. We want to thank everyone for their support and interest in our programs. Today's program is in partnership with and sponsored by Remember the Women Institute, the Wagner College Holocaust Center, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, and the Rabin Chair Forum at George Washington University. And I want to acknowledge a generous donation by Ariela Heilman, who is one of our distinguished guests today. That's it. And now I would like to invite Rochelle Seidel, founder and executive director of the Remember Women Institute, to give the opening remarks. Rochelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Medine. Thank you to Ghetto Fighters House and to our other partners. I will be brief, although I'm going to be talking about 30 years of history. I realized when I was preparing for this that I've been involved with this story of sabotage of the four women, Rosa, Estusia, Regina, and Ella, for 30 years, although I didn't really realize it at the beginning. In 1995, I went to the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Ravensbrück Women's Concentration Camp, which was one of my research topics. And I went alone, and I was kind of orphaned there, and because there were delegations, and the Israeli delegation adopted me, quote unquote, and took me on their bus. And the one that really organized it was Lydia Vago, and there were others. And I interviewed them and I talked to them, but I talked to them about when they arrived in Ravensbrück after the January 18, 1945 death march. Now I realize a lot of those women, especially Lydia, who was very active in memorialization, but many of the others I was on the bus with were working in the Union Commando. So since 1995, I've known some of these women. Moving on to a few years later, I think it was around 2000, I went back to Ravensbrück, and at that time, we went up north to Neustadt Glebe, which was a satellite camp. Lydia Vago helped to do an exhibit in the city museum. And this is where some of the surviving members of the commando were liberated from. So that was in 2000. In 2014, in New York, there was an exhibition at the Center for Jewish History called October 7, 1944. By the way, you all don't need me to say that October 7 is kind of a scary date, but that's when it was. And so that was the blowing up of the crematorium in Auschwitz. And so I was waiting to go into the auditorium because I was doing a program connected with the exhibition. And a woman came in and introduced herself, and it was Ariela Heilman. And I didn't know her before, even though she sang and still sings in the choir of my synagogue. But she told me then that she was the daughter of Hanka Wajcblum and the niece of Estusia, who was one of the four women. And her mother, Hanka, is very much featured in the film, and you will hear from Ariela later. So I reorganized my program very quickly because I brought up to the stage Ariela and her friend who was visiting, I think from Belgium, Arlette, who is the daughter of Marta, who took care of Hanka after the death of Estusia. So little later, 4 years later, in 2018, Remember the Women Institute did an exhibit, an international exhibit called Violated Women in Holocaust and Genocide at the Ronald Feldman Gallery in New York. And we borrowed a lot of art. One of actually, well, there were two, but one of the pieces of art was by Ella Liebermann-Shiber, and it was a drawing. She also was in the Union Commando, which I didn't realize in 2018. And she did a drawing of the hanging. And I, Ariela was at the exhibit. I walked up to her and she was gasping because there was this drawing of the hanging in 2018. 2 years later, in 2020, right before COVID, I joined Ariela and some others at Yad Vashem, where we did a little memorial service at the sculpture there for the four women. And then when I was preparing for today and I was rereading Laura Shelley's book, which is called The Union Commando, where she interviewed a lot of witnesses about the hanging and the Union Commando, I realized that my friend from 1995, Lydia Vago, and Hanka Heilman were friends, and that they worked together on this memorial sculpture at Yad Vashem. So we've come full circle from my 1995 to now. And now I'm very grateful to have Ariela as my friend. And I just want to end by saying that the story of these four women, which is often left out of Auschwitz narrations, is like other stories of women in history, women during the Holocaust. Sometimes they're left out, and we really have to emphasize them. And I just hope that today's discussion and the film Sabotage help with this effort to put women's experiences into Holocaust history. And I thank you all for being with us.
And I want to thank you, Rochelle, again, first of all, for being one of the organizers of this program and for all the work you do in helping us to remember the women and their stories during the Holocaust. And we're not finished. We still have a few other things planned for our audience. So keep in touch with us and we'll let you know what we're cooking up in the near future. And now I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, who is Dr. Sarah Cushman, and she will be giving a presentation on women prisoners in Auschwitz-Birkenau. She is the director of the Holocaust Educational Foundation of Northwestern University and senior lecturer in the history department. Dr. Cushman served as head of educational programming at the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University from 2013 to 2016, and from 2007 to 2013 as director of youth education at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. She earned her PhD from Clark University in 2010. Her first book, congratulations, Women in Auschwitz, is under contract with the University of Indiana Press. Dr. Cushman is co-editor of the forthcoming Routledge Handbook on Auschwitz-Birkenau and co-editor-in-chief of Holocaust Studies, a journal of culture and history. She has earned fellowships from the Hadassah Brandeis Institute, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Holocaust Educational Foundation of Northwestern University, and Steven Spielberg. Dr. Cushman is on the executive committee of the National Consortium of Directors of Centers in Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights Studies, and a member of the Illinois Holocaust and Genocide Commission. And with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening. Good evening to everyone. It's a privilege to be with you. Thank you for the invitation to join this program about one episode of women's resistance in Auschwitz. As mentioned, I'm director of the Holocaust Educational Foundation of Northwestern University. We support university-level Holocaust research and education around the world through conferences, seminars, educational programming, and grants. Please see our website, hef.northwestern.edu, for more information. And now to our topic of the day. Just give me a moment to share my screen. Scholars now understand that at least as many Jews were murdered at close range by mobile killing squads as were murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz and other Nazi death camps. Still, Auschwitz stands as a symbol of the Nazi genocide. Its history has been examined from multiple angles, yet the women's section remains understudied. The Auschwitz Women's Camp was a dynamic place in which women of all stripes shaped their lives in what few ways they could for the 2 3/4 years of the camp's existence. 3 broad categories of women lived and worked in the women's camp and in Auschwitz. The most powerful were women affiliated with the Nazi camp administration, primarily guards, but also telecommunications experts, nurses, and SS wives. Today, however, I will focus on women prisoners, which encompass the array of prisoners, Jewish and Gentile alike, who engaged in a daily struggle to survive the deadly conditions in Auschwitz. We will explore their experiences and responses, including the acquisition of privileges and semblances of power. Alitza Rotova had been crammed into a closed boxcar for 2 days with little food, no water, and an understanding that she and her companions, all young Jewish women from Eastern Slovakia, were being sent to a labor camp. On March 26, 1942, the doors are opening and the SS men are waiting. "Where are we?" she asked. No one proffered an answer. Forced to jump from the rail cars to the ground and to leave behind the little they had brought with them, the women marched a short distance through the gates and into the main camp of Auschwitz. It was her first day in Auschwitz. Her arrival, along with those of her companions, marked the founding of the Auschwitz Women's Camp. That date was the 26th of March, 1942, and at that time, Hitler had been in power for 9 years. World War II had been underway for over 2.5 years. The Auschwitz camp had existed for nearly 2 years. The Nazis' policies towards the Jews of Europe had been genocide for only a few months, and Auschwitz had not yet become the central location for genocide. Let me orient you first to Auschwitz and women's places in it. Auschwitz sat in what is now Poland, but at the time was the eastern reaches of the German Reich. Himmler envisioned Auschwitz as a prototypical Nazi town for which he needed an abundance of labor. This explains in part the size of the complex. Auschwitz was founded in July 1940, and from then until the establishment of the women's camp in March 1942, housed primarily Polish Gentile men. Eventually, women dwelled in different parts of the Auschwitz complex, including the staff building near the main camp and several agricultural and industrial subcamps, including Babice, Bobrek, Budi, Harmense, Plavi, and Raisko. These are the local ones within the Auschwitz zone of interest, which is depicted here. Plans for the women's section placed it in the subcamp of Birkenau, which was to house thousands of laborers to construct the area around Auschwitz. When construction ran behind schedule, the SS built a wall separating blocks 1 to 10 in the Auschwitz main camp to contain women. Initially, the only women prisoners sent to Auschwitz were laborers. Transports comprised of Jewish children, elderly, and others began to arrive a few months later. Those the Nazis deemed unsuited for labor were murdered in improvised gas chambers using the deadly efficient Zyklon B insecticide as they began construction of 4 large crematoria in Birkenau. In August 1942, the women's section was moved to Birkenau, section B1A, where conditions already deadly deteriorated. July 1943, so roughly a year later, saw the expansion of the women's camp into all of section B1, which remained its primary location for the next year. Around this time, the Operation Reinhardt death camps, Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka began to close. Intended for the annihilation of Polish Jewry, they had begun operation at various times in 1942. By summer 1943, over 90% of Jews in Poland had been killed. Auschwitz became the primary Nazi murder camp. In early 1944, Germany occupied its former ally Hungary and deported hundreds of thousands to Auschwitz. Spring and summer 1944 became the busiest period in Birkenau's history of mass murder. Labor, however, remained a priority, and thousands of Hungarian Jews were selected for labor, resulting in a dramatic increase in the population of the women's camp as it spread into other parts of Birkenau. As summer ended and the Soviet army approached, the women's section contracted quickly. Many women prisoners were transferred to camps inside Germany, and others were annihilated. The camp SS destroyed evidence. They dismantled the crematoria and burned administrative records. Most prisoners were forced to evacuate the camp on foot in mid-January 1945. The Soviets reached Auschwitz on 27th of January to find roughly 7,000 debilitated prisoners, remnants of the crematoria, thousands of surviving documents, and warehouses full of items stolen from murdered Jews. This marked the liberation of Auschwitz. Let's turn now to the experiences of women in Auschwitz. To enter Auschwitz-Birkenau as an inmate was to enter another world. It meant an end to living in the normal sense. Irmgard Muller recalled violence, shock, and bewilderment. Any hope was crushed forever when the train reached its destination. The arrival at the ramp was the most shocking experience of my life. There were guns pointed at us all around, and a pandemonium of warning shots, of shouted orders, barking dogs, and the screams of terrorized families being torn apart. Approximately a year later, in early summer 1944, Agi Rubin reached Auschwitz. The impression was unbelievable. There were these striped-clothes people, dogs, German soldiers, and it was very, very chaotic. Things just happened so quickly. You didn't have a chance to think or to know what's happening to you or what's awaiting you. Jews disembarking from trains found an incomprehensible environment in which the vast majority would be killed, and the lucky few transformed into prisoners. About 90% of Jews who arrived in Auschwitz-Birkenau were killed immediately in the gas chambers, a torturous murder by cyanide gas, which was preceded by the humiliation of public nudity, deception, and violence. Those selected for admittance were forced to march to Birkenau from the arrival ramp. Guards beat and abused them along the way. Initiation followed. Helen Stern, one of the first transports from Slovakia, recalled that they let us into a common bathroom, stripped us of all our clothing, made us stand naked, and put us in large tubs. They shaved all our hair everywhere. They gave us uncleaned Russian uniforms. My uniform became my only clothing for the next 10 months. As I looked around, I could not believe what the loss of hair could do to one's looks, even the prettiest of us. They then registered us, and from that moment on until after the war, I became nothing but number 2282. The entire Auschwitz camp complex was a location of mass death. The situation for women was even worse than for men. Rudolf Höss, the first commandant of Auschwitz, acknowledged after the war, everything was much more difficult, harsher, and more depressing for the women, since general living conditions in the women's camp were incomparably worse. They were far more tightly packed, and the sanitary and hygienic conditions were notably inferior. Ilse Michel, an assimilated, middle-class Jewish woman from a small town in Germany, claimed, there are no words in any vocabulary to describe Birkenau. The stench, the dirt, the lice, the diarrhea, the hunger, the despair, the agony, the hatred, the beatings, and death. This well-documented litany was exacerbated by hard labor, which included demolition of Polish homes, draining swampland to make it agriculturally productive, farming and animal husbandry, and road construction. Deadly conditions and overwhelming terror pushed each prisoner to focus on survival. Prisoners who survived beyond the first several months developed tactics to combat annihilation. They utilized practical, psychological, and social strategies. Some scholars have seen significant differences in coping mechanism used by men and women. My research indicates that women and men employed similar strategies. They shared stories, recipes, and religious observances. They tried to wash themselves. They slowed down work when possible and struggled to protect themselves and loved ones from violence. They stole needed items from the SS. They undertook to help each other, and they forged social bonds. Most of the specific strategies looked remarkably similar. Relationships between prisoners, however, varied by gender. While women tended to form groups based on family structures, camp mothers, sisters, and occasionally brothers, men tended to bond in pairs or in trios. Men and women alike saw that going it alone was a virtual death sentence. Still, prisoner responses did not necessarily or even primarily yield a positive effect. Sexualized violence began as soon as a woman prisoner entered the camp. Pregnancy, if obvious, sentenced a woman immediately to death. Initiation involved forced public nudity, shaving all body hair, and body cavity searches, all frequently accompanied by leering men who sexually insulted or groped new arrivals. Women experienced these actions as an assault on their bodies, and many feared further sexual assault. Pregnancy was usually a death sentence for mother and child, even if it went unnoticed upon arrival. Annie Sussman, a Jehovah's Witness from Austria, was 6 months pregnant when she arrived in Auschwitz in August of 1944. A short while later, SS men requested that pregnant women register. She did not, and those who did were murdered. When she eventually gave birth, an SS man learned of it and killed her infant. Female doctors in the prisoner population could help expectant mothers survive by killing the child or fetus. For them, for the doctors, this was an expression of humanity. They saved one life. Despite their anguish and horror, they concluded that this was the least unethical action under the circumstances. Menstruation also caused anxiety. Women who continued to menstruate, and this was actually very few women, they experienced fear, discomfort, and violence. Most women prisoners ceased menstruating due to starvation and malnutrition. They feared the Nazis had damaged their reproductive capacity, a fear grounded in hearsay, experience, and observation. Several SS doctors conducted medical experiments on inmates carried out with total disregard for their well-being. Many died or were killed, either during the experiments or after. Jewish women comprised the largest group of prisoners in the women's section of Auschwitz. Other women were also present. Romani women who faced racial persecution and genocide, Jehovah's Witnesses, political prisoners from across Europe, especially from Poland, criminals and antisocials, among others. Gentile prisoners, even as they faced the same deadly conditions as Jewish women, had several advantages. They were not subject to gas chamber selections beginning in early 1943, and they usually had family and friends who remained alive outside the camp from whom they could receive correspondence and packages, forms of spiritual and physical sustenance, respectively. In his final book, The Drowned and the Saved, Primo Levi identified prisoner functionaries as occupying a this is a quote, gray zone, poorly defined, where the two camps of masters and servants both diverge and converge, end quote. Until recently, scholars have viewed those inhabiting the gray zone as complicit and as incapable of engaging in solidarity or morality and as having abandoned their humanity. The behavior of privileged prisoners has been particularly confounding as they seem to have adopted the goals of the National Socialist regime. What becomes evident from study of the women's camp is that some Jewish women acquired privileged positions very shortly after the founding of the women's camp, that they assumed such roles as a means of survival, and that the relationship to camp authorities was one of complexity, not simply of complicity, or maybe even primarily of complicity, not primarily of complicity. Most women prisoners, whether they arrived in 1942 or 1944, were forced to work outside in all types of weather, performing strenuous labor, which exacerbated the effects of starvation, filth, sleep deprivation, overcrowding, and violence. Most perished within months of their arrival. There were typically only two ways to increase the chance of survival: securing a better job or securing a camp function. A good job typically meant work inside, in a building or within the camp itself. Indoor work protected a prisoner from exposure to the elements, cold, heat, rain, snow. A job inside the camp meant avoiding forced marches to and from work sites that drained prisoners' already depleted energy. A work assignment might give a prisoner greater access to food or entail work that was less physically demanding. In some cases, their positions changed less frequently than for those who toiled in outside commandos. Sometimes labor details included all or several of these advantages. Prisoners coveted such work assignments, even though some entailed difficult and disgusting tasks, such as factory work or latrine cleaning. Favored work assignments included kitchen duty, sorting goods stolen from arriving transports, factory work, agricultural work, scientific experimentation, office tasks, work in infirmaries, and processing new arrivals. The other path to privilege was through official functions: work supervision, oversight of the camp and living quarters, and camp administration. The first two entailed management of other prisoners. Capos were prisoner functionaries who oversaw work assignments. Typically, cordons of male guards surrounded work details to prevent escape. A single camp guard led each work detail, and capos supervised smaller groups of prisoners. Capos ensured that prisoners labored continuously, maintained pace and discipline during marches to work sites, and when work slowed, they meted out punishment. Other prisoner functionaries were responsible for the women's camp and the barracks. Camp seniors, the highest prisoner position, oversaw camp sections, readying inmates for roll call, cleaning the camp, food distribution, and the division of prisoners into work units. Block seniors oversaw individual barracks. They supervised and disciplined women prisoners during the night and during lockdowns. Bunk seniors supervised individual bunks within a barrack. A woman guard affiliated with the SS oversaw each block. She chose the block senior, who in turn chose those who reported to her. Better work assignments led to envy and resentment, unintentionally resulting in interpersonal friction. Official functions were part of the SS effort to divide and control the prisoner populations. Other distinctions among prisoners, stemming from nationality, educational level, and other characteristics external to Auschwitz, or part of both Auschwitz and the outside world, exacerbated hostility. In most cases, this served the interests of the SS. In exchange for these various types of work, women in privileged positions earned power, more and better food and other necessities, space and sometimes access to hygiene, and freedom from debilitating labor, which meant a better chance for survival. Assuming a privileged position distinguished an Auschwitz inmate, it caused others to view her as part of the camp hierarchy, as complicit with the SS. Prisoner workers who registered, tattooed, and cut the hair of new arrivals exemplify how even unintentional privilege helped the SS undermine prisoner solidarity and divert attention from their overarching responsibility for camp conditions and genocide. New prisoners wondered how older prisoners could contribute to their dehumanization. Helen Waterford recalled that a prisoner forced her to disrobe in front of male guards. The one who stripped me took at the same time my wedding band off my finger. I still thought they were Germans. I did not understand they were Jewish prisoners. Initiation stood out as a traumatic moment of transition from citizen of the world to denizen of Auschwitz. The conveyors of this transition, other prisoners, were perceived as the primary agents of the transformation and therefore as part of the camp administration. Common prisoners had an even more difficult time understanding prisoner functionaries with direct supervisor responsibilities. When a fellow prisoner, particularly someone who was not German, meted out punishment, the impact, particularly the psychological impact on internees, was more devastating than violence inflicted by camp personnel. Women prisoners experienced daily violence at the hands of capos. Their brutality seemed to convey not only an enthusiasm for personal power, but also an affinity for the Nazi project of genocide. But the situation for prisoner functionaries was much more complex. Functions and privilege advanced individual survival. In fact, assuming such a position was the only way for a prisoner to improve her negligible chance to endure. To sustain their privilege, many prisoner functionaries had at least to appear to forward the goals of the camp administration. The SS sometimes required or encouraged violence from supervisory functionaries and threatened punishment if they were not sufficiently vicious. Certainly, some prisoners enjoyed the surrogate power such violence demonstrated. Some may have taken on the perspective that some prisoners were subhuman and deserving of violence. Here, the goals of the individual and SS coalesced, but they were not identical. Privileges offered a perspective beyond immediate survival that sometimes included sex, leisure, and resistance, goals that did not serve the SS and suggest that privileged prisoners did not come to agree with the ideologies and perspectives of the SS. The women who worked in Canada illustrate the point. Canada was the term prisoners applied to the area of the camp where slave laborers sorted goods from arriving transports of Jews. The SS forbade prisoners from taking any items from Canada, but many of the prisoners who worked there smuggled needed goods into the camp for their own or others' benefit. Such contraband included food, clothing, thread, and medication. The thriving black market in Auschwitz was supplied almost entirely by goods from Canada, and prisoners who worked there risked their lives to bring them into the camp. Improved circumstances brought greater opportunity to help others. In fact, these kinds of efforts characterize resistance in the women's camp. Individual efforts to resist and organized efforts reflect a focus on day-to-day survival and mutual aid. Such efforts characterize the men's camp as well, but there, men also organized for escape and rebellion, and those organizations reflected militarized hierarchies. Women's organized resistance seems to have been more diffuse and much less hierarchical. And I'd like to just conclude briefly by saying that most prisoners, the vast majority Jews who were admitted to the women's camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, experienced an environment of unremitting violence, extreme deprivation, and social and physical annihilation. A small number of prisoners were placed in positions that permitted them a minimal degree of autonomy created by access to space, material goods, personal hygiene, or power. The behavior of women in these positions ranged from violent brutality to principled mutual support. The efforts depicted in the film Sabotage were exceptional, carried out with tremendous bravery and risk, and are an important aspect of women's resistance in Auschwitz. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your lecture. It really gives us a general perspective on the experiences of female prisoners in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and it's exactly what we wanted. It was important to have this background before we move on to our discussion about the documentary Sabotage. This next part of the program will deal with the documentary film. Our audience today is divided. Some or most people have already seen the film, but many may not have. So we're not going to have any spoilers here, but I will give people an opportunity to ask any question they want to ask about the film in the chat box. It's only fair for at the end of the program. We will have a conversation with award-winning director and screenwriter Noa Aharoni, as well as the daughter of Anna Wajcblum, who was part of the underground resistance in Auschwitz, and whose personal diary was the catalyst for the film. And she was in the resistance along with her sister, Estusia. And those who see the film, who saw the film, understand the connection. But before we meet and talk with Noa and Ariela, just a brief synopsis of the film, and then we'll show the trailer. So Yoni, get ready. On January 1945, less than 2 weeks before the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp evacuation, 4 female forced laborers, Estusia Wajcblum, Rosa Robota, Ala Gardner, and Regina Saperstein, were hanged in public after being accused of sabotaging the Nazi war machine. Sabotage tells the dramatic unknown story of the women's underground operation in Auschwitz-Birkenau. It is a story of feminine heroism, resistance, and tragedy, told through the eyes of Anna Heilman, Estusia's sister and the youngest member of the women's resistance.
Sabotage, Sabotage! Das ist ein Verbrechen gegen das Deutsche Reich. Ein Akt der Sabotage und dafür gibt es nur eine Strafe.
Estusia!
We kind of knew that we're not going to survive. Therefore, we're going to make our days count. When the reality becomes too painful, we have the support of each other. The reality didn't matter. You either tell yourself that you're going to die with dignity, or that you are going to survive at any cost. We have gunpowder. Can use it? Let's try. What can happen? We're not going to come alive anyway. What the heck? We are not going to the crematorium alive. It was all very secret. Very secret. If it was dangerous, it was. We were terrified of the consequences, but not terrified enough not to do it.
So I would like to introduce Noa Aharoni, a winner of the Best Documentary Film Award Forum Documentary Creators in Israel, nominated for the Ophir Award for Best Documentary. And Noa Aharoni graduated with a degree in TV and cinema from Sapir College in 1994. In 2017, her documentary Shadows about the abuse among the second generation of the Holocaust by their survivor parents was selected for the prestigious Dakavi Film Festival in IDFA. By summer's end, Noa's first feature film from 2011 has won a distribution award and was nominated for the Israeli Academy Awards. Really, the film was screened at Haifa International Film Festival and got an honorable mention, and Rehovot Women's Film Festival. And Noa, I just want to thank you again for being with us. And I hope you were looking at the chat box while we were while the program started. You can see how many people commented about the film. And like we discussed, we're not going to talk about the content of the film, so that those that didn't see the film yet still have the opportunity to experience it firsthand. So we only have a few questions for now. And again, everyone is invited to ask their questions afterwards, to ask Noa whatever you want to ask about the film, including content and spoilers and whatever. I want to really say how much I appreciate this incredible documentary film. You brought the story of the women's underground in such a sensitive and empathetic way. The Holocaust is not the easiest of subjects to talk about. And in your case, you were not only the director, but also the screenwriter. As well, this is not your first film dealing with the Holocaust. So our first question is basically, how did you learn about the story? Because like many of us are saying, many didn't know about the story. Of course, in Israel, the story is a little different because I've known about it for 25 years, working at the Ghetto Fighters House, but most people don't know the story. And also about Anna Heilman's diary and why you decided to do the documentary on this subject.
So first of all, I didn't hear about this subject at all. The public doesn't know about this. Maybe, maybe few people know about it that are subject to the Holocaust, excuse me, museums and such. But I didn't hear about it until the producer came up to me and told me that he has this subject about women underground and he thinks that a woman should do this film. Actually, he was watching the Eichmann trial and wanted to do a film about Eichmann trial, and then he heard somebody in the witness that gave witness in the trial, and he heard about this story, and he didn't know about it anything. And then he went to research it, and then he heard about Rosa Robota is the most known from all the women. And then he heard about Anna and the book she wrote in Hebrew, in English, which was translated from Polish. And he wanted to think about a way of doing this, and he thought about maybe bringing memory agents such as Ariela Heilman and other people. And when I saw in Spielberg's museum the testimony of Anna Heilman, I said, she's the one that needs to tell this story because she's terrific. She's such a strong woman, and she's a great storyteller. And so I knew that she should be the core of the center of the story. And her sister, of course, which was one of the 4 women who got hanged at the end. So for me, it was very obvious that they are the ones that needs to tell their story. And then I became we got a research that what she did was just write down names and stories from the hanging and try to get other witnesses that testimonials that were in the Yad Vashem and Washington Museum, Holocaust, and of course Spielberg. And then when I got a lot of women testifying to this event, I knew it was a really big event, a huge event. So it was more puzzling to me. How did I never hear about this? And then I was starting just, watching all the testimonies of all these women and trying to pick out the best of them that can tell the story and become like a puzzle, like saying all the stories that everybody have been there, even if they didn't be in, even if they weren't in the underground themselves, they were witness to the hanging and they knew what's going on. So for me, it was very important to bring the people the women that were in the situation and not only the agents of those people. So this is my first film that I haven't bought a camera. I didn't film one frame. It was all archives and animation.
That's if you haven't seen the film, and you can see that actually in the trailer, is that it's incredible that I had the sense that you were interviewing these people. That you took pieces of an interview with them.
Right.
When you see the animation, you feel that way. And they're talking and you're listening. And there's one testimony in the movie. It's not a spoiler here, but one of the men that was giving testimony, suddenly you hear the woman asking a question. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's from the Spielberg. And they used to ask questions and they used to record the questions as well. So yeah. So that it's, does it make you feel, this is just a spontaneous question. Did it make you feel more detached from the subject because you weren't actually meeting with people? For example, today, I went to a real conference with real people, not in Zoom, and we actually could see each other, and it's a completely different experience. And I'm asking, how did you get past that barrier? Because I don't feel it in the film. Right. I don't feel like you.
So it was very interesting because I didn't feel a barrier that I didn't meet him. Actually, I felt that I knew him very well. And like, it was like, for me, it was like I was interviewing them, although I didn't ask them one question, but I really get the sense that I did. And like, I really met them. I felt like, and also don't forget that I had the book and I used the book and other quotes from other women that wrote down, and I used it as a narrating system to do like to hear the Anna's voice when she was younger. I did that in Hebrew because of the public Israeli television. And for me, it was like I knew her because it's like Anna Frank, like everybody really gets attached to this just lady and this girl. And of course, Anna was like, for me, were such a lovable personality. Although she was very tough, I really liked her and I fell in love with her. So I didn't feel like I didn't know her. On the contrary.
That's interesting because I also did research on a diary, and I could, and again, when someone is writing from their heart and their soul, you really can connect. That's what a diary does. So I'm thinking to myself, actually, I can really understand what you're saying as a director after reading a diary, as opposed to reading maybe just a transcript of a testimony. You really are connecting to a person's feelings, and it makes it be easier to make that connection. And it goes over very well in the film. And it's really, maybe with the first film I ever saw that you're actually not the interviewer. Right. And the people that you're interviewing aren't with us anymore. It's a new generation of filmmaking. And that leads me to my second question, because we can see in the trailer that you incorporated animation into your film. As Liat Steyer-Livni writes in her book, Holocaust Representations in Animated Documentaries, this is a new phenomenon and inaugurates a new field of Holocaust commemoration, a cinematic tool that we have focused on in several of the Talking Memory programs because it's my passion. And I always ask questions, why? How can you be so brave to use animation in a Holocaust film? So what were your reasons for using animation? I just want to remind everyone that Avi Katz was the illustrator for Sabotage and did a brilliant job, a brilliant job.
Yeah.
And what do you think
Yes.
is the unique, well, the first question is, what were your reasons? And then maybe I'll continue that with, what was the unique contribution of animation to the story you wanted to tell without giving away
Yeah.
much?
Okay. So first of all, I have to ask myself as a director, how can I reenact something that was 75 years ago in a place that wasn't filmed? There's no footage from Auschwitz, of course, no footage from the camp and all that terrific, horrific things that were going on. So to take actors and do that, it's like, I think it will be very poorly made because I don't have the facilities. I'm not going to go to Auschwitz. It doesn't look the same. So how can I do something that resemblance to Auschwitz, but I cannot copy Auschwitz? It's impossible. I'm not Spielberg. And I thought that maybe because it's such a harsh subject and very, very hard to digest, maybe I can take pictures like illustrating animation and make it more digestible for the audience. It's like something more naive. And I do it abstractly. I didn't like do it precise like you see Auschwitz, you see mostly, you see emotions. I wanted to make emotions by the illustrations, by the animations. And I picked the black and white because there was no color in my eyes and my views in Auschwitz, and also because it's like a very old movie that doesn't have colors. And actually, first of all, first I thought I would do more animation. I wanted to do it more animation, and then when the public television saw it, they told me, "Don't touch, it's great." And they didn't want to touch it. I said, no, I have to make a little adjustment, a little movements. So they say, okay, but not much because it works for us. They saw only animatic, which is storyboard, like pictures, not moving at all. And I said, no, it's too much. I want to make it more live. So they agreed, and actually, I have such a great compliments on that because it was really powerful to people, and people that are very, very maybe very touched by it told me that they cried when they saw, stuff like they're animated, but they felt like it's so real. So I guess it's a good it's a good outcome.
Actually, somebody wrote that animation looks like their memory, a dream, or a nightmare, and I think that that really puts it right on spot.
Yeah, it's like, yeah,
feelings.
Right, exactly. When she's the animation were all a lot on the diary, so her memories when she was younger, because we see her when she's giving the testimonies, and she's like 69, something like that, Ariela, I think. But when she was younger, so the narrative and the animation makes it like back then. Yes.
Actually, someone wrote about a younger generation. I'll save that for a minute. I think that it definitely allows us to maybe break that wall. That sometimes with documentary films that deal with the Holocaust or traumatic events or historical events that are difficult to watch, somehow, not that it makes it easier, but allows us in. And I think that what you're saying is when you come through feelings, and that we know for a very long time, that trying to teach history without putting in feelings or personal testimonies or telling stories really is just dry history, and no one is going to listen for too long. So I think that whoever hasn't seen the film yet, they're going to appreciate this balance between the archival material they put in and the testimonies that are live testimonies that were given, I guess, with Spielberg, and the animation that kind of fills in the gaps. And it reminds me of the Bible, where there are a lot of stories that are told, and you have to fill in the gaps on your own. A lot of things aren't told, and here you kind of use animation to fill in those gaps. Was there any unique contribution that animation gave you? For example, because you could use animation, you were able to do something that you would never be able to do with another medium?
I think, of course, because when she's talking like more poetry and stuff, and you see the fire going into the sky, and so, of course you can do it on film also, but I think it's easier to get the emotions, feeling the triangle in her in her in herself. And I think also when I came to this film, I thought about an action movie. I didn't think about it as an Holocaust movie. And so I didn't come from, the sadness. Actually, I came from the action and the bravery. These are women that were very brave and did something crazy. And I wanted to go to the action. So that's why the music is more active. It's not like piano, soft piano. It's something more
Or a
metal.
violin.
Right. So there's more electronic music, which is like from here and now, and not from there. And also I can do stuff that, like be in the camps, be in the factory, and do whatever I want, because it's drawing.
Right. So, like I said, we're going to make this short this time, but I do have one more question. I wanted to ask you about your next project. And of course, we talked ahead of time a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it connects to what you were just saying about this project. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing in 2025 after the last year and a half.
Yeah, so my next project, actually, before I tell about my next project, I'm going to say about two films that they've done about the 7th of October, October 7th, about the female soldiers, watchers, איך אומרים תצפיתניות? Excuse me.
Oh,
observation.
Right?
Observation, yeah, the female observation in near Gaza. There were two films I did. One, it's called Nobody's Soldiers, about the females who were murdered in the army, in the camp,
in the war room.
In the war, yes, exactly, in the war room. And the other film was called 477 days, because it was about the soldiers, the overlook, right? Who came back to Israel. And I after 15 months, I did about the families and how they survived this horrific times. So this is something which was already broadcast in the Israeli public television. My next project is to do with women bravery. Also, my other projects, everything I do almost is about bravery and female. So this project is going to be a series, but this is the pilot. It's going to be in Doc Aviv. So everybody wants to see my next film is invited to Doc Aviv. It's about Ada Siredi. She was the first commander of the Mossad. She was a Jewish Italian person, and she helped bring the survivors to Israel on ships, on the Aliyah ships. Nobody heard of her because she didn't come from the organization. She was just a woman, 40 years old, who wanted to know where her husband went He was a paratrooper. He didn't come back from the war, and she wanted to go and see what happened to him. So she became the commander, like it's like in a nutshell. And it's an amazing story about her. And she was a brave and very creative woman, and she became a very good commander. But the men and beneath her and over her didn't like this fact very much. So this is about bringing her back to history because she was thrown out of history, like in Sabotage. I didn't hear about this underground female activities, and it's about time that everybody knew her. And this is the first chapter. There were more three to come. Different female that has done a very big thing in Israeli or Jewish history, and you will hear about them. It's about time.
Wonderful. So we'll keep track. And I have to say that really throughout the almost 5 years that we're doing the Talking Memory program, Rochelle Seidel is a pioneer in researching about the women during the Holocaust, Jewish women during the Holocaust. And we've been doing these programs for a few years together to make sure that the female voice is brought out. And I'm so glad that we had Sarah here as well, because we're talking about the next generation of researchers and filmmakers that are going to carry on, Rochelle, right? They're going to carry on what you started 30 some odd years ago back then. So with that, we're going to take a break. I'm trying to figure out right now, honestly, how to be the host, look at the questions and also ask questions, but we'll make it work in the end. So for now, the questions in the chat box, I can't answer. But keep asking because I'll look afterwards. I want to invite our second speaker for a conversation, and that's Ariela Heilman. I just want to do a quick introduction while she unmutes herself. Ariela was born in Israel and grew up in Ottawa, Canada. And during World War II, her father, Joshua, served with the Jewish Brigade of the British Army in North Africa. He was a Hebrew teacher and principal in Ottawa, later worked for the Canadian government, and retired as a translator of English to Yiddish and Hebrew. Ariela's mother, Noa Wajcblum, who is the core of the film Sabotage, was a survivor of Auschwitz and worked as a social worker with the Children's Aid Society in Ottawa. Both parents fought in the war for Israel's independence. After graduating from Herzliya High School in Montreal, Ariela studied at the joint program of the Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia University. She is currently working in real estate, a profession of passion. Ariela has been married for over 40 years to Ray Fiola. Fiola, am I saying it right? A recently retired executive at CBS. Along with her sister Noah and brother-in-law Sheldon Schwartz, Ariela continues to keep her mother's story of resistance and survival in the forefront of the public conscience. And with that, I want to say shalom to Ariela. We've been talking over the past few weeks or few months, and I've been getting to know the story. Like Noah said, people don't know the story, and it's true. I only knew very little about the story of the four women and the underground. And what we wanted to do today, because we don't want to give away spoilers with the movie for those who haven't seen it yet, is to talk a little bit around the movie, a little before and then a little after. And Ariela put together an amazing presentation that Yoni is going to help us show as we talk. We'll have to let them know when to put up the first picture. So, like I said, the film primarily focuses on your mother, on Anna Wajcblum Heilman and her sister, your aunt, Estusia, and the underground resistance in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And though there is a little background at the beginning, I would like to ask you to share with us the pre-war life of the Wajcblum family. Because when we were talking between ourselves, you said, you can't just start with what happened with the resistance. These women came from somewhere. They grew up somewhere. And maybe that's what possibly got them to where they were and the decisions that they made. So Let's hear a little bit about family life pre-war.
Pre-war. Okay, so first slide, because
First slide, Yoni.
um, my mother had a very unique uh, family. Both her parents were deaf. They were deaf mute, and her first language was sign language. And I think about what made her the storyteller that she was really the need to communicate in nonverbal ways. She was the youngest of three daughters, and while her sisters were off at school, her job was accompanying her mother in the marketplace. And she had to translate because her mother was very proud, though she could sign, she would not speak or sign in public. And she didn't speak Polish. She was Russian speaker from birth, and she could lip read, but she couldn't lip read Polish. So my mother not only had to negotiate for items, and her mother bought each item at a different store, was also to translate from Polish to Russian so her mother could respond to the negotiation. I guess the next picture would be good, Yoni. These are the three sisters. My mother is the youngest. Estusia's on the right, and their oldest sister, Sabina, in the middle. What's really interesting about this photograph that my mother chose as the cover for her Auschwitz memoirs is, despite being deaf, and they also had a nanny who was hired from the School of the Deaf where her mother studied. She was their nanny till they were no longer in Warsaw. They would go see Shirley Temple movies, and the two of them would sit sketching in the dark theater the dresses that Shirley Temple wore. And this is a dress from Shirley Temple that the nanny would make for them. I guess, and the next picture was Yoni from the train station. And this is my mother's maternal line. Here's my mother also in a Shirley Temple inspired dress. I actually found a screenshot of Shirley Temple in that plaid. Her oldest sister, Sabina, is the one on the very left, and her cousin, Sonia, has her arm around her. I believe that that's her mother at the top of the stairs, that through the years she got older looking than how, I imagined her in pictures. They would go every summer to Druskaniki, which was just like we do in New York, leave the city in the summers. Every summer, this Wajcblum clan, also maybe a name familiar to Israelis, the Impressionist wing of the Tel Aviv Museum was donated by relatives of the Wajcblum side. The next picture would be my parents. This is they were married in 1947 in Palestine. And in the next picture, that's the house that they built with land that they got from Karen Kayemet Israel. I don't know if it's JNF or UJF. Karen Kayemet was, and my mother met my father through her camp sister Shoshana, who, when she ended up in Palestine to be reunited with her older sister, she was in social work school and needed an English tutor. Shoshana's brother, my father, had gotten to Palestine on the last ship that left Poland in August of 1939 to study at Hebrew University. Okay, there was another, so his uncle was a pioneer. And here's Marta and my mother over the decades. So my on in the post-war picture in Belgium, where
is that where they went first? Is that where she went after liberation?
Yes, she tells a story about when they were in displaced persons camp, and there was a big hall with tables with countries. Everyone was supposed to be repatriated, was to go to the table of their country where they were to be returned. And my mother convinced Marta. My mother knew that there was no one left for her in Warsaw, that she saw her family was executed, and that Marta could always find her family in Czechoslovakia, but they needed to make a stop in Belgium because one of the women that my mother worked with in the munitions factory was Belgian, Rosa Tabakman, and they talked about food all the time. And the food was the best, and the ice cream was especially the best in the world in Belgium. So my mother convinced Marta to repatriate to Belgium for the food, and then they deal with family later. And this is a picture when I went with my mother to Brussels in the, I don't know if it was like aughts, the early aughts. We went to visit Marta. My mother said, I have to see her because I'm afraid that I won't see her. And in the end, my mother passed away before Marta did, but it was an unbelievable reunion of sisters. It was just wonderful. Next, I guess we jump to post-war. And my parents, with my sister Noa and me, my brother-in-law Sheldon, who edited, and as she wrote in the introduction to her memoir, Marta saved her life and Sheldon saved her story. And that's my mother and father, my sister and I, the 4 grandchildren. And I was always so grateful that my father especially was able to experience the bar and bat mitzvahs of all his grandchildren. Wow. That was huge. That was, and Maydeen, I don't know, you had a question about the
Yes,
third.
I do have a question, because one of the things that we talked about, it's also, I think it's mentioned it's mentioned in the film through your mother's testimony, but people were asking about the book that you wrote, Never Far Away, the Auschwitz Chronicles of Ariela Heilman, and somebody wrote in the chat box the name. But the book came out only in 2001. We went and we looked and we found the date, and she wrote it in 1945. And she says in the film, same thing, for 50 years, I didn't look at it. So here we're talking about 56 years, 56-year gap. Can you share what you know about your mother's decision to wait so long, and why did it suddenly become important for her to, in the movie that she says one thing, but I think it's a little more than that.
It was really, the impetus was in 1987 when Marta and her oldest son, Sammy, came from Brussels to Ottawa to visit my mother. And pretty much Marta threw down the gauntlet. She said, the whole world knows about Rosa Robota. I promised your sister that I would take care of you, from the gallows. They were able to exchange notes, and she promised Estusia, who needed to have this comfort to be able to die in peace, as she said, that she would take care of my mother. And Marta really felt that setting the record straight, that there were 4 women who were executed, and to tell their story. So that started my mother's approaching Yad Vashem to talk about, and also doing the testimonies, but she didn't stop writing. I learned from my brother-in-law, who was very involved. First of all, it took them 3 years to write the book. It was before the internet. It was by fax, by phone, by snail mail. And then 7 years to find a publisher, 40 rejections. So wow. I know. It was funny. University of Calgary Press, which had its press all about wheat and growing of grain in the Midwest and the prairies of Canada, Mordechai Richter, came from the provinces, and he had donated his writings to that university. So they figured, based on their Jewish department, which was Mordechai Richter's paper, they would publish the book. So that was really another miracle in a series of miracles. But Sheldon reminds me that she wrote in 1975, she wrote in the 90s, that, but she had to live her life. She had to be a social worker to foster children. She ended up having a career in French, the French that she learned in Belgium. So this was another way for her communication, really. Each of my parents spoke 6 languages in their lifetime. And that was standard for there. But her her sign language, her exposure to the life in that home. She started school early because she was just jumping up and down and she needed, some discipline. And they all went to a private Catholic girls' school, which was the best education to be had. And her mother was like, really, she had very, very extremely high standards for everything, how you comported yourself, how you looked, how you dressed. And even in the ghetto, they made sure to start shirts with potatoes and shine shoes with uh, whatever came out of the fireplace.
The coal.
Ashes. With coal and I mean,
ashes. Yeah, I imagine more wood than coal.
Yeah. Well, they had that's how they heated and that's how they cooked with it. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. It was a roundabout way. She never stopped writing, but she also had to live her life. And I think as her daughter, that there was an enormous part of her life that she kept locked up. That, even in her writing, she felt it her duty to speak up. There was already Holocaust denial in her lifetime. And because she was so young, she was 11 when the Germans invaded Poland. She had had her whole education by that age. She read all of her sister's books, and she was a reader, which made her a writer, which made her a speaker, which made her the witness that she was. She did it kicking and screaming, but as in every part of her life, obligation is what led her. That was the guiding light.
And that's so interesting because when we do our program on the archives, that's exactly the point, that the survivors that came to the Ghetto Fighters House, they said, we have to be the voice of those that didn't survive. Otherwise, who will tell their story? And that connects to Noah as well. I want to ask one more question. Because obviously, I was going to ask you about, continuing the memory and the legacy, but here you are, you're doing exactly what you're doing to be the voice to continue everything. I want to ask you one more thing. And of course, this came up when I saw the movie as well. We know that there were 3 sisters and the movie really talks about your mother and Estusia, but what about Sabina? What was her story? Why wasn't she with you? There's a little bit at the end of the movie about where she ended up, but can you tell us a little more about your eldest aunt?
As the eldest sister, their mother decided she needed a math tutor. So they hired a Polish officer, Jewish Polish officer, who was studying law at the University of Warsaw to be the tutor. He ended up being the tutor for all the girls. He became a part of the family. He joined them at dinner. They asked him about legal questions. They talked about the goings on of the day. He realized that he, as a Polish officer, needed to get out of Poland. He needed to go east to Russia. This was not a war he was going to fight. And he offered them all papers. He could have gotten them all out of Warsaw. And my mother's mother said, no way, we're not leaving the dishes, the china, the furniture. We're here. I survived the first war. I know what we have to do. We have to make preserves, and that's what we'll do. And she reluctantly gave permission for Sabina to leave, to escape with the officer. So they eloped, they got married, and they spent 2 years in Siberia and made their way to Iran, where they waited for papers to go to Palestine. And that's where they were for most of the 40s into the early 50s.
So I think we have one last slide with Sabina, right? Yoni, there's one more slide?
Yes.
Yeah, here we go.
And that's my cousin Mickey. I had one first cousin in the world. Sadly, he's no longer with us. And this is what he did to honor his parents. And I don't have a lot of pictures. The sisters were estranged for most of my life. I met Sabina at my wedding when I was 30, is when I met my first cousin for the first time.
Mm.
But we became very close. And he became very, very close with my mother. And they were more like siblings, once they reconnected. And he joined us in Brussels for that visit.
And had ice cream too.
It was more caviar and champagne with Mickey, but
Okay.
it was my
I mean, I look at this, it's like looking at a memory wall, and I think to myself, how many families were lost and how many families were found, and how important it was to have at least a little bit about what usually we have in albums, and albums actually becomes one picture frame with just a few pictures and a whole story that's being told with so much being lost. So I remember when you sent me this picture frame, and I thought, wow, this is what you have. This is what you have. This is what your family has. And
of that part of the family. But what's
that part of the family
is that both my parents had family in Palestine before World War II. My mother's family was there from World War I. And my father's family are Moshavniks in Yasmin Ron. Shout out to the Heilman family there. And all of their generations are in uniform now. In Miluim, actively in uniform. So, כל הכבוד.
Really?
לכולכם. עם ישראל חי.
Am Yisrael Chai. Ariela, thank you so much for adding, maybe filling in some of the gaps again, in a very animated way, I have to say, right, Noah? Also, Ariela is very animated.
Yes,
just sharing a little bit
she's
about,
just like her mother.
She's just like her mother. And so we just wanted to add a little bit to the story beyond the actual event that Noah documented so well. So thank you again for that. And we have one more speaker, and I think this is really an incredible way to end the program. Of course, I'm going to look at questions while Yasmin is talking, try to listen and look at questions at the same time. So our final speaker today is Yasmin Ron, one of the Ghetto Fighters House archivists, and who will be giving a short presentation on Ella Liebermann-Shiber and her art as testimony. I just want to say a few words about Yasmin. She holds a bachelor's degree in Israel Studies from Ben-Gurion University, a master's degree in Holocaust Studies from the University of Haifa, and is a graduate of Genealogical Studies from the Israel Genealogy Research Association. For the past 4 years, she has worked as an art collection researcher at the Ghetto Fighters House Archives. Her article, The Artists Workshop in Mechelen Camp, Belgium again, was published in 2022 in the journal Dapim, Studies on the Holocaust, Volume 35, published by the University of Haifa and the Ghetto Fighters House. And with that, I want to give Yasmin the floor.
Thank you very much. So the art collection of the Ghetto Fighters House Archive is one of the largest art collections focusing on Holocaust art. The collection currently included over 3,000 works of art, drawing, paintings, and sculptures. The collection was established by the museum's first creator, Miriam Novich, as early as the museum's founding in 1949. The artworks in the collection can be divided into 4 groups. 1, artworks created during the Holocaust, mainly chalk and pencil drawings on paper, created in ghettos and camps, often in secret. This group is relatively small due to the technical difficulty of drawings and creating during the war. Second, the largest group in the collection, artworks created by Holocaust survivors artists after the war. Many Holocaust survivors found therapy in art, painting their memories of the horrors of war, alongside sweet memories of the Jewish life and the parents' house that were disappeared. This group of arts is large and diverse. 3. Artworks by more and less famous artists who have no direct connection to the Holocaust. And the smallest group is artworks by artists who second and third generation artists. So today I will talk about Ella Liebermann-Shiber. Our works are included in the first two groups. Works created during the Holocaust and works created after the war by Holocaust survivors. Okay. Ella Liebermann-Shiber was born on July 29, 1927, in Berlin. Her father was Yasmin Shiber, born in 1890. And her mother was Rosa Greenkraut, born in Bedzin, who immigrated to Germany. Ella was the younger sister of Alexander and the older sister of Leon. This is Rosa, Ella's mother, and Joshua, Ella's father. Just a minute. In October 1948, the Nazis expelled Jews living in Germany who were not German citizens, most of whom were Jews from Poland who had immigrated to Germany. Rosa Liebermann, who, as mentioned, was born in Poland, was also expelled, along with her husband and children. The family settled in Rosa's birthplace, Bedzin. With the outbreak of the war, the German army invaded Bedzin. The ghetto was established in July 1940, where all the Jews of Bedzin and Jews from the other towns in the area were sent to the ghetto. The Liebermann family was also sent to the ghetto. In the beginning of August 1943, following the revolt that took place in the ghetto, the Bedzin ghetto was liquidated, and the 8,000 Jews who remained there, including the Liebermann family, were sent to Auschwitz. Immediately upon arrival, the women and men were separated. The father, Joshua, and the brothers, Alexander and Leo, were immediately sent to the gas chambers. In Auschwitz, Ella painted portraits for the SS officer, and in doing so, managed to survive and save her mother's life. When the Red Army approached the camp in January 1945, the prisoners were sent to Death March to Germany, to the sub-camp of Ravensbrück. In May 1945, Ella and her mother, Rosa, were liberated. Immediately upon her liberation, Ella began documenting her memories in chalk and pencil drawings. Ella and her mother returned to Poland, where Ella met Red Army soldier Emanuel Shiber in this picture, and the two fell in love. In March 1947, the couple Ella and Emanuel, along with Ella's mother Rosa, boarded the immigration ship Ben Hecht, which departed from Port de Bouc in French. They hoped to reach the shores of Israel. The ship was captured by the British Army, and the family members were deported to the deportation camp in Cyprus. In the camps in Cyprus, art studies were held within the framework of the Rothenberg seminar with the painter Naftali Bezem teaching the lessons. And Ella Liebermann-Shiber was one of his students, one of the best. She even took part in creating the art album In Cyprus Deportation. You can view the entire album in our online catalog. Okay. Just a minute. Sorry. After 13 months in Cyprus, Ella Liebermann and Rosa immigrated to Israel. They settled in Kfar Ata, later Kiryat Ata, near Haifa, where the couple had 4 sons. In 1979, Ella began studying painting, sculptures, and graphics at the University of Haifa. Most of her artworks dealt with the documenting the Holocaust. In 1989, Ella Liebermann-Shiber presented her exhibition Life on the Edge at the Ghetto Fighters House Museum. The exhibition included 92 drawings documenting her memories of the war years. In 1992, an art album was published by the Ghetto Fighters House with all the exhibition's drawings, including notes writing by the artist. Ella Liebermann-Shiber died of illness on March 2nd, 1998. In her memory, her husband, Emmanuel, organized an exhibition of her paintings at the Auschwitz Museum. Now, this is another artwork from Life on the Edge. Now I want to talk about this painting, this drawing, The Punishment. We talked about Sabotage and the women's uprising in Birkenau. Ella Liebermann-Shiber was a witness to this important chapter in the camp's history. She was a friend to some of the women and was forced to watch her friends being executed. After the war, she painted the hanging scene and wrote about it. You can read it here, about Ella Gartner, Esther Weisblum, and Regina Sprechstein, and Rosa Rabota. I'm sorry. And she wrote that here, just a minute. Just a few days earlier, Ella showed us her right hand, which was missing a finger. You see, Ellie, from this hand, throw my baby Rochale away from me. And for screaming so much, they cut off a finger. I fought for my child, but they were stronger. That's what Ella write about her friend. Another important drawing is this one. This painting, the first that Ella painted, was the last to be donated to the museum. Ella painted this painting in June 1945 in Poland. The painting was donated by Eugene Mellon. After he heard about the Life on the Edge exhibition at the museum, Eugene was a soldier in the Polish army and knew the Shiber couple back in Poland. He received this painting from Ella in Poland immediately after the war. For decades, Eugene kept the painting even when he immigrated to Canada. It can be seen that the painting was folded for many years. Only after Life on the Edge exhibition, Eugene donated the painting to the Ghetto Fighters House Archive. And those days you can see the original painting in our new exhibition. Thank you very much. This is just a small part of Ella's artwork, and even smaller part of the archive work. You can see our full catalog on our website, and of course, feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin, for introducing us to Ella Liebermann-Shiber. I think that those of us in Israel have an opportunity to see the work in the new exhibition. Rachel Perry, one of the researchers that donated her her choice of a document to put in the exhibition, it shows one of the pictures that shows the hanging as well. And we also have a facsimile in our camps exhibition. So that's for the Israelis, and of course for anyone who comes to visit, invited to visit our exhibitions at the museum. Thank you so much for giving us the information. Again, on the one hand, we heard that this is a story that was very little known. On the other hand, we have so much information available about this underground operation. And like Noah beautifully said, just you have to put the pieces together. And I hope that tonight or today we were able to put some of those pieces together as well for those that saw the film and for those who haven't seen the film yet. I'm just going to check the chat box quickly. I was looking for questions. I didn't see questions specifically about the film. Yes.
I send the link to our catalog, online catalog, in the chat. So if someone wants to.
Good. So put that in the chat box because people do want that kind of information. And you also put your email, which you could put in again if you want. Because I'm going to start saying my goodbyes because if we don't have any specific questions, there was one question to know about Yaakov. Somebody asked if what happened to Yaakov.
I saw that one. So Yaakov, unfortunately, when he came to Israel, there was rumors that he was a capo and he was a traitor, and so he went to trial, and then he was not guilty, found not guilty, but the crowd and all the atmosphere was very hateful, and he left the country, left Israel. His wife had divorced from him when she was hearing about that. And he died, unfortunately, on his own. He had a child, but he was estranged from him. So he was like very unfortunate to not have been the hero that he was, which he did help the prisoners, the Jewish prisoners. So his life was a bit of a tragedy.
Yeah, it's those choiceless choices that we really can't judge, but in any way they were. Yeah. So that is unfortunate to hear about his friend. And thank you for asking that question. Somebody did have a question for Yasmin, actually. If you had said that Ella and her husband met and worked for Schindler, did you say that?
Me? No.
Yasmin.
Oh.
No. Can you ask again? Sorry.
Yeah, it says, did Yasmin say Ella and her husband met with or worked for Schindler?
No.
Oh, okay. Somebody was asking. I didn't hear that either, but
Shiber. I say Shiber. Her last name. His last name.
Okay. So that's the the confusion. Somebody also asked about what time the people were interviewed. We're talking about the Spielberg archives, right, Noah? All of them. So
they were at the 90s.
In the 1990s.
Yes.
Yeah, the 1990s was definitely a watershed decade as far as recognizing survivor testimony. Even though the Fortune archives were already created and there were testimonies being given from the very beginning, and we had the Ringelblum archives as well, testimony wasn't considered authentic enough, and as opposed to a document that could be done by a Nazi that could also be falsified. So what's real and what's authentic So the 1990s was a big decade for testimonies. So with that, I want to thank all of our guests. I want to start with Rochelle Seidel from Remember the Women Institute, our pioneer in researching Jewish women during the Holocaust. I want to thank Dr. Sarah Cushman for coming to sharing a broader understanding of the life of women in Auschwitz-Birkenau. It maybe helps us to better understand just how difficult it was to resist, and if you did resist, how brave you had to be or crazy in order to do that. I want to thank Noa Aharoni for creating this brilliant documentary, and people are asking, where can we get it? Where can we buy it? How can we use it in education? Are there any plans of incorporating it into educational programs?
Actually, yes. Actually, yes. Real brief. I think of doing a short animation film only, like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And we have also a broadcaster that is going to do this in US schools.
Right. I think that would be incredible. And people actually see a need. And of course, as someone here saying that they want to use it in their classroom. So you put in your email. So check the messaging.
I put down my email, and if everybody wants, you can invite me, or in Israel, in the US, it's more complicated, but we do it. So just write me and I will respond to you.
And if you Google her name, Noah's name, you will find it in English. I found her in English, so no problem finding her in English, of course, in Hebrew as well. And I want to thank Ariela for being with us and sharing your family's story. It really is an incredible family, an incredible story of survival, of resistance, of determination, and strength that came through not only through the movie, but also Anna's life before and after the Holocaust. And Yasmin from the Ghetto Fighters House, how do we say it? We threw you into the mix. Now you're a part of our Talking Memory team. Thank you so much for doing the research and for bringing the story of Ella Liebermann-Shiber to us, closing the story that Sabotage is based on, and showing how Ella saw it through her eyes, her very young eyes, right after the war. And with that, I want to thank our audience today. For those of you that stayed with us until the end, kol hakavod. There will be a recording, of course, that'll be sent out in a few days in an email. And of course, you can get in touch with any one of our guests today. They're all available. You just have to Google their names and they're there. And with that, I want to say shalom. And while we were talking today, there were rockets sent over Ashdod in Israel. So I was also with my phone all night, waiting to see what was going to happen. But somehow we ended up finishing peacefully, at least in our small area of the world. So shalom, and thank you, everyone. And have a great day, afternoon, evening, Laila. Good.